We are here. We are live for another round of Astro-Babble. Good morning. Good morning. How are you? How are you doing? Yes, you. I'm talking to you. Got a couple live streams going with Facebook and Instagram. We are here with another 8 charts donated by you, my lovely followers. Thank you so much for jumping on and providing me with birth date, places, and times. If you would like to be in the queue, or if you would like to submit friends, family, people who you have consent from to put them on social media, just give me their birth dates, places, and times via private message only. Also, for those of you on Facebook, I know that you've been sending a lot of people my way, but if they're not a friend of mine, sometimes that message goes into spam. So remind them to friend me and then send their birth info so that I can get it and I don't have to like search through spam a million times. Or just send me an email, sam@scorpiorisingastrology.com. So let's pop open a fizzy water. And let's go ahead and get to these charts, shall we? Good morning. Good morning, everybody who's jumping on. I appreciate you very, very much. Good morning. Good morning. Okay. Let's talk about Desiree. I'm gonna go with Desiree. Apologies for the mispronunciation, if that is the case. We have 11:28 a.m. in Bay City. Let's take a peek. Oh, we have a nice little Libra stellium in the chart. Fun. We have both Saturn and Jupiter in Libra, as well as Ascendant in Libra and Pluto in Libra, all in the first house. So we've packed that first house pretty intensely. And we've also got some interesting ego stuff, emotional stuff to kind of counterbalance with that, with Sun and Mercury and Leo in the 11th house of friendships, as well as North Node, Mars conjunct MC up in Cancer in the 10th, and then Moon somewhat opposing but not really in Capricorn down in the fourth house of family and relationships. The ruler of the chart is Venus. She is in severe detriment in Virgo, as well as in the 12th house of hidden enemies. So we have a lot of moving parts in this chart that I think start to build us this story of the need for self-esteem to be worked on in a big way. We have a lot of very powerful planets in the first house of self. Jupiter in Libra is absolutely excellent and brings a lot of legal flair to the table, as well as Saturn in Libra, the sign of his exaltation, in that first house of self. Having both Jupiter and Saturn here, there's immense expansion paired with immense restriction. Saturn wins out because Saturn is stronger in Libra, but we also have Pluto here in the first house of self and the ascendant. The idea of fairness being very strong in this person's life, the idea of social justice, the idea of understanding karmic ramifications of the healing journey, understanding and owning one's own baggage, very important in this chart. But also, because the ruler of the chart, Venus, is in the 12th house of hidden enemies, we have this exploratory healing journey that I think needs to be talked about in the chart as well. Because that 12th house, having a lord of the chart in the 12th, automatically brings the self-esteem to attack the personality. So we have this kind of you are your own worst enemy complex, paired with the lord of the chart being in the 12th house, which is a natural healing house. On the lower end of the spectrum, when we see a lot of 12th house placements, there are strong associations with things like jails and asylums, and putting some parts of ourselves away so that we can work on them, often in a forced way. Like the healing journey triggers a healing crisis. 12th house is also associated with hospitals, where we literally, in times of crisis, in times of panic, in times of intense spiritual need, we shove these aspects of ourselves into the 12th house in order to kind of cook them over time. But on the higher aspect, this could be retreats, this could be karmic healing, this could be spiritual journeying, working in those places like jails, like hospitals, like hospice. 12th house often having death associations as well. The idea of putting the lord of your chart here, especially Venus and Virgo, who's a more kind of buttoned up version of Venus, and that Venus really comes forward with this controlled feminine energy of Virgo, and she's able to sort and manipulate and manage the resources at her disposal. And I think that that's a beautiful kind of complex that you've developed in the chart. On the flip side, Virgo tends to be, especially Venus and Virgo on the 12th, Virgo tends to be very hypochondriac. Virgo tends to be, Venus and Virgo tends to be very much germaphobe, very much overly focused on dietary cleanliness, to the point of potentially not eating and eating disorders, because Virgo especially is that sign of the small intestine. And kidney issues that would develop from that because of Libra being in the first house. So you've stacked the deck in a very interesting way, my dear. And I think that one of the ways that you kind of pull yourself out of this cycle is by us investigating up in your 11th house, this Sun and Mercury in Leo, as well as North Node. Like, you have such a powerful charisma. And I think that one of the things that people really like about you is how raw and real you are. Like, you don't pull punches. And you're nice. Like, although we have so many outer planets and heaviness with that Saturn, Pluto, and Libra in the first house of self, there's this Sun in Leo that comes through in your social interactions that's just so beautiful and so divine and so loving and lovely. Yeah. Also, I love a good Mercury in Leo. It really allows your conversation skills to shine. It really allows you to be very dramatic with your words. But, in social situations, that can be super fun. Like, your life of the party at the same time that you've put all of this emphasis on the healing journey of your chart. You've also stacked yourself with some pretty cool personal qualities to counterbalance the light with the dark, as it were. The shadow side that needs to be investigated, that you were like, no, I'm going to keep this close to my heart, because I'm not here to just play around, but I'm also going to give myself a good chunk of playing around too. I think that there is a lot of the healing that you personally experience that needs to be done does stem from the family dynamic. We have this moon in Capricorn in the 4th house of family. So there is a lot of emotional safety in the family dynamic, but also a recognition of, oh crap, I'm being pushed here. I'm being stubbornly shown how to do things the right way, but also how to do things the right way through being shown the wrong things. Yeah. Capricorn tends to always do things the hard way. So family dynamic, giving you those strict, rigid boundaries that Capricorn loves so much, but also an emphasis on kind of what not to do through them just taking the hard route every single time. I do think it's interesting that the moon in Capricorn is ruling this Mars in Cancer up in the 10th, conjoined your MC, your midheaven of success. I think one of the associations that I see with that a lot is family is often the key to your personal success. There could be a lot of fame in the family or attention in the family already, but the idea that the family house and the 10th house of success are connected in that way. Both Mars and the moon are not favorable. The moon is in fall and the Mars is in detriment, because Mars is opposing its exaltation in Capricorn, and the moon is in Capricorn, which is opposing its natural rulership in Cancer. So we have this juxtaposition with the family dynamic where at some point you're going to need to learn how to surrender, but also how to surrender softly, because there is a middle ground. And I think that a lot of your chart is asking you to find that middle ground with all of that Libra activity. So if you can just understand that, yes, there is fierceness. Yes, there is determination. Yes, there is struggle. Yes, there is unfairness for sure. But if you can wrap that into a social situation, learn how to laugh it off, and create emotional stability via your family dynamic, and embrace some of those lessons and transmute those into success, I think you'll be absolutely golden, girl. Okay. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining me. Let me minimize some of these messages. Buenos dias. Yes. If you would like to join the forecast, just private message birth dates, places, and times to me, and we will get you in the queue. We are on chart number 2. We have Carlena. Carlena, born at 6:17 a.m. in Inglewood. Let's take a peek, shall we? Virgo ascendant with Jupiter in Virgo. I like it. That's cute. Ooh, what? Y'all, I cannot make this stuff up. I just can't. I'm sitting here, I'm reading your charts. This is supposed to be some random ass order, but the fates have decided that this morning we're going to deal with 2 Libra stelliums back to back. How are we going to do that? We've got Saturn again in Libra, in Cazimi with the sun at 0 degree Libra in the second house. That is a fascinating placement. Absolutely fascinating. As well as we have Mercury in Libra and Pluto in Libra, almost conjunct 1 degree away in the second house of finance. Carlena girl, you've got some money stuff in your chart that we're going to have to work through in this lifetime. And I think in a really good way. Like, so Saturn is in its exaltation in Libra. It loves to be in Libra. When we think of Saturn as that planet of restriction, when we think of Saturn as that planet of tough lessons and tough love and really teaching us how to excavate our strengths over time, you've put that conjoining your sun in the second house, and put Saturn in the best sign. So you've almost completely mitigated all of the damage that Saturn would do normally, all of the hardness that Saturn would do, and you've really just backlit Saturn in this beautiful way. And I'm such a fan of it in your chart. I think that especially putting Saturn in Libra in the second house of finance, perfect. Absolutely perfect placement, because you've also put the ruler of your chart here, this Mercury in Libra ruling the ascendant with Jupiter on the ascendant. Like, girl, you have stacked yourself for financial wellness. I am very, very pleased with all of these financial placements. And it's just going to get better over time. Like, you're here to master money and the second house of wealth and resource and time and energy and those material things that really help you navigate the physical world. I think that you've just really, really, really put some fabulous placements in your second house. But that's very much what you've emphasized in your chart. There are other things that we can talk about, but that's the most important bit, is as long as you surround yourself, especially working in the financial field, because you've got Saturn ruling your 6th house of work. Like, it comes so easily to you. I would highly recommend that if you want to just earn some quick cash, like get an accounting degree, like go for bookkeeping. You'd be really, really good at it. We've got this moon in Pisces in the 7th. You're attracted to a spouse that's just so emotional and spiritual and intuitive, and somebody who's almost the exact opposite of you in that way. Somebody who's able to show you that softer side of life that I think you recognize that you need a lot more of. Somebody who's able to, especially with Saturn so prominent in your chart, like slow you down and soften you up and really get you to experience some of that like gushy intimacy that Pisces loves so much, with that moon being in the 7th house. But also, if you start to lose track of your life, Carlena, I would highly recommend that you find a relationship that's able to give you some semblance of intimacy, because there is a lot of really, really key aspect to having a moon in Pisces in the 7th, where when you're in a relationship with somebody else, especially if that relationship is very emotionally supportive for you, that's where you're going to recharge a lot. And I think that that's an important kind of skill, is if you're single and if you're go and you're doing all these things and you're like, nothing feels like it's fulfilling me, chances are you actually do need that other person in your life in order to slow you down, to soften you up, to conform to your speed. And that's, you are the vase for somebody else's water, is a good way to think about it. Ooh, that's an interesting placement, though. One other thing I wanted to talk about before we jump to the next chart is the idea of Venus and Leo in the 12th house, very close to the North Node in Leo in the 12th house. How do I want to read that? And that Venus and Leo is ruling everything in the second house. I think one of the things that you're going to learn about this time around, honey, is you investing in yourself. understanding that you putting money towards things like therapy, yeah, absolutely, absolutely essential, to help you uncover a lot of the, just a lot of your own stuff. Like, that 12th house is hidden enemy hospitals. It's a therapy house, like it's a healing house. And so I think that if you were to remind yourself on a regular basis that, you can spend that extra dollar at the grocery store for the organic whatever it is that you're buying. Yeah. You can also save the money up for that retreat that you want to go on to further your healing journey, and or invest in something like, getting regular massage, or like, especially if you notice yourself getting really, really health compromised, it's important for you to invest the time, invest the resources, invest the money for you to get things like a blood workup done, start to understand your vitamin and mineral levels, understand what it is, research nutrition, research exercise, like do all this 12th house work that I think is really, really important for your healing journey specifically, and for you to understand that money isn't just this force for you to collect, it's also a powerful vessel for you to direct and then send those resources to yourself via the self-care process. Yeah. So that's kind of where we're going with your chart, Kalena. Alrighty. Thank you. Thanks for that, honey. I appreciate you. Tristan, Chantal, Desiree, Anne-Marie, Carlena. Yes, Carlena. So let's talk about that. And here's the thing. So I used for your chart the 6:17 a.m. time that you gave me via private message. But the reason why I put the moon in Pisces in the 7th is because I'm using whole sign houses, which for me is much more accurate than Placidus. It's just a different chart system. I encourage you to work with both. I've had excellent readings from different astrologers who use different house systems, but one of the reasons why everybody's commenting about the accuracy of my readings is because when I personally used to use Placidus and then I switched to whole sign houses, everything was so much more spot on. And that was something that I kind of had to grow into, and I had to learn from people like Sam Reynolds and Chris Brennan and Austin Kopek and Caitlin Kopek and all of these major astro figures in the community, and they were like, we use whole sign houses. Kelly Surtees, another one, because we really think that it's more precise. So take what I say with a grain of salt. Always, I'm not the end all be all, but this is what I've used over time with clients and with these mini sessions to be far more accurate than Placidus, in my opinion. Let's move on to Katie. So Katie was born 9:16 a.m. In Weymouth. Love a good Taurus ascendant. 3rd stellium in a row. Can you believe it? This one's a Pisces stellium with Venus ruling the chart in Pisces. Girl, I love it. Fabulous. Yes. Jupiter in Pisces, Sun in Pisces, Mercury in Pisces. But that North Node in Taurus and that Ascendant in Taurus being ruled by that Venus. Venus is out of combustion. Yay. We love it. Fabulous. Absolutely fabulous. So this Venus in Pisces is ruling the chart from the 11th house of friendships. We also have Sun and Jupiter and Mercury here in the 11th house. So personable. Yeah. So friendship oriented. I think one of the things that you're going to be learning a lot of this time around is just you developing your own sense of personality. That's one of the flaws of Pisces that I find that a lot of people don't necessarily understand, is Pisces is mutable water. When we think of water's ability to literally flow through the path of least resistance, but also to accumulate and to morph and to be unstable in that way, Pisces as mutable water really embodies that unpredictability of the water element. And so with this Taurus ascendant and with Venus and Pisces in the 11th ruling the chart, I really think one of your personal journeys this go around is for you to remember that having an identity is essential to life. Yeah, you can't just You can't just mimic and mirror your way through this life experience. Although that's easy and you're very, very good at it. Like, I'd love to see you do some impressions. For sure, with all this Pisces energy. Like, you're so good at absorbing other people's personality and kind of conforming it to yourself. However, this go around with this North Node in Taurus in the first, we really need to understand that you developing an identity, you developing a personality, you developing your sense of self, who you are as a person, is going to be far more important than you constantly conforming to the people, the places, the things that you're surrounded by at any given moment. Yeah. So just something to be aware of. I think that that's a really big part of your chart is really reminding yourself, like, hey, yes, in order to survive, survive in a social interaction perspective, especially because ever since the time you were young, like this fourth house moon in Leo being ruled by the sun in Pisces, like ever since you were young in the family dynamic, you've been thrown into social situations and you've been told to find your tribe, and you're like, I really just don't freaking fit in everywhere, so I guess I'm going to have to fit in everywhere. And you've decided to play this game of mimicry, and I think that in some ways that's a very useful skill, and you can definitely monopolize on that, especially if you were to choose a career that embodied like voice acting would be excellent for you. Especially because you could work from home, you could have a home studio, you could do the recordings, you could do all these things. But also the idea of you falling prey to having so many personalities, but none of them are yours. Like having so many ideas of what a person should be, but none of them are really yours. And I think that that's the pitfall of all of these Pisces placements. So use it to your advantage for sure, but don't succumb to that amorphous blob that too many Pisces significations tends to become. We do have this Saturn, Mars, and Uranus in the 8th. It wouldn't surprise me on a lower octave of the expression if you had friends at an early stage of your life pass away, with both malefics here in the 8th house of death being ruled by Jupiter in Pisces in the 11th. That's one expression of it. But this 8th house of business, this 8th house of, where's Mars ruling? Let's see. Mars is ruling 7th house of Scorpio. Where's Aries? 12th house. Yeah, there's going to be this connection to health and wellness in the chart for sure, because we've got Venus ruling the 6th house of work through Libra, Mars ruling the 12th house via the 8th. Yeah, I think the more I'm seeing the chart unfold, the more I'm also seeing this idea of having to understand medicine, having to understand health, having to understand especially the death, the dying process, the grieving process, very, very important. I think that's one of the reasons why you also fear having a spouse or a long-term intimate relationship, because we've got this Pluto in Scorpio retrograde and this South Node in Scorpio also in the 7th house of relationships being ruled by this Mars and Sag. I think that all of the impermanence that you've decided that you've surrounded yourself with, and that you're understanding, like, hey, this life experience is very fleeting, everything can change on a dime, and a lot of your mutable placements in Pisces have confirmed that, like, everything's changing, everything's constantly moving around. I can never own anything, because life is always this dance, this game, nothing ever stays still. That shouldn't prevent you from loving. Yeah, and that shouldn't prevent you from giving your all to the people that you care about, and that certainly shouldn't prevent you from giving life what you have to offer, because I think there is a lot for you to offer to the people, places, things that you choose to have in your inner circle. You just need to be aware that it's not like these placements aren't an excuse for you to hold back. In fact, they're an excuse for you to give even more, and for you to take these Pisces placements and be a little bit more active with your love. Be vocal about how you feel with people. Don't hold back just because you think, oh, well, what if 5 years down the line we're no longer friends? Or what if 10 years down the line my spouse passes away and we have this life together and then it's dashed? You can't think like that, honey. You just can't. There will always be toxicity. There will always be unexpectedness. There will always be the idea of impermanence. But we need to also understand that you forming a personality is part of staking your claim and trying to make the best out of an ever-changing world, as opposed to just trying to flow through the motions and make it through until you die. We need to not pull your punches so much and actually enjoy the life experience for the temporalness of it, as opposed to holding back because of that. Cool. Thank you, everybody. We are on chart number 4. Let's talk about Erica. So Erica was born 10:33 p.m. in Perth Amboy. Let's take a peek, shall we? So we've got this Aries ascendant, Leo stellium, 4th stellium. Jesus. Ooh, I know this story. I know this story all too well. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. I see it. Okay, Erica, so let's talk. So we've got this Aries ascendant. This Aries ascendant is in Cancer, in the 4th house of family. Mars does not like to be in Cancer. Mars doesn't really like to be in the 4th house of family very much, because family is where you get all close and bondy and lovey and dovey, and Mars would prefer to take over the world. Mars would prefer to be active. Mars would prefer to be in the top half of the chart, not the bottom half of the chart. Mars wants to initiate, and Mars does not want to hug it out. But this Mars in Cancer in the 4th, you've put the ruler of your chart here because you've decided, like, family is a necessary burden, is a good way to think about it. Necessary because your 4th house is in Cancer, and that's always a beautiful house cusp to have. And you've got this this moon in Taurus in the 2nd ruling the 4th house. Like, family is a good investment, and you recognize that, but it doesn't stop the family unit from being semi-destructive, very competitive, having some of those emotions used against you in an angry way, but also having a lot of fun and understanding that even though family might put your mother might put the mother and smother, or your father might not know how to handle his emotions. There's this overwhelming sense of family is important. Family is the thing. I must have family in life, even though it's dysfunctional, even though it's not appropriate. I challenge you to find a family dynamic that is appropriate. Yeah. Family is the first crucible that you choose, that you're given. And a lot of times, regardless of if you agree with it or not, it is one of the most formative aspects, and it is the most appropriate formative aspect for you, even though you might not understand it. So, as we move on, we have this Leo stellium in the 5th house of children and parenting, and this is where your chart starts to really open up and get good. So we have Sun in Leo conjoined Jupiter in Leo in the 5th house of parenting, children, creativity, sexuality. Absolutely amazing placement. You've put the most prosperous planet in the chart in the center of the Sun in the 5th house of parenting. You, my dear, would be an excellent, excellent parent. This Mercury in Leo, this Venus in Leo, Jupiter can join the Sun in Leo. Like, I'm so thrilled that you've decided that the family dynamic might have been rough for you and it might have been misplaced, and even though it was misplaced, it still had silver linings. But you're so determined to get that family dynamic correct. Yeah. Now, when it comes to the person who you choose to be your spousal partner with, yeah, we do have some issues here. We have Pluto in Libra in the 7th house of relationships. Pluto is not a planet that I enjoy seeing in the seventh house of relationships. It's a spouse that is often more mature. It's a spouse that is often prone to take advantage of the spouse, especially if they are younger. It is a sign of secondary marriages, especially halfway through the life around 50, being much more beneficial than the first. However, despite all that, you have all of this lovely energy in the fifth house of children and parenting. So in some ways, I'm just going to say, like, baby daddy might just be in it to give you the child that you were supposed to have to fulfill your life journey. Yeah. And then you can marry a better one later. That's just my 2 cents about it in terms of your chart. Because really, where you start to unlock stuff in your chart is when you work with children and when you start to surround yourself with this idea of being a parent and potentially being a stay-at-home parent, because we've got this Mercury and Leo ruling Saturn and the North Node in the 6th house of work, health, pets. I think that you also potentially doing pediatrician stuff would be an excellent move for you. Again, just anything that you can do to work with children and that 5th house of parenting, that's really the core aspect of your chart that brings out so much of your flavor, so much of this fiery Leo energy, so much of this Jupiter Cazimi that's just so lucky and prosperous. I wouldn't necessarily be concerned with long-term relationships until about halfway through the life when that Pluto matures. But you also have massive markers for success with Saturn ruling the midheaven in the 10th, and making an almost exact trine to the moon. You've got this Earth trine happening with Moon in Taurus at 12, Saturn in Virgo at 13, MC in Capricorn at 14. That's a pretty substantial placement, my dear. I think that you specifically are meant for great things, but it has to weave back in to the children and the parenting. If you're not tapping into those resources, then you're not going to be fulfilling the major promise of the chart. Yeah. Because family is really where it's at for you. So if you start to stray from those topics, you're going to start to realize that life isn't really going as expected. You're not getting as much fulfillment. It's more about the day-to-day interaction with the 5th house of children, parenting, sexuality, creativity, as opposed to other aspects of the chart. Like you're here to leave a legacy, Erica. That's really what you should be focusing on, not the trivial stuff where people want to come in and out of your life for no reason. Like, screw them. So that's all I got to say about that. You're fabulous, Erica. I love you. I'm already remarried. Good for you, girlfriend. I love you. Cool. So let's go ahead and, we're halfway through. So just as a reminder, if you would like to be a part of the Astro-Babble, feel free to send your birth dates, places, and times to me via private message. Do not leave those in the comments to protect your privacy. I do need that exact birth time. If you would like to send in friends, family, always with consent, give me their birth times as well. We'll add them to the queue. If you would like to schedule a private consult with me, you can always go to scorpiorisingastrology.com, which is my website. You'll be able to see my consultation offerings. If you're interested in learning astrology, you can look at my online classes, as well as I do one-on-one tutoring too. So that's my plug. Let's move on to our 4th charts. Our fifth. We are on our 5th chart, ladies and gentlemen. And we're looking at Alessia, my dear, my lovely. We met in Connecticut a while back. Cheers to you, Mama. Hope you're doing well. We have 12:35 p.m. in Casper. Let's take a peek. Oh, that's interesting. Girl, they tried to put the reins on you. Family tried to tell you what to do. You were not having it. Not having it at all. That is absolutely hilarious. So we have a full moon in Capricorn in the chart in the 4th house of family, which is all of that lunar energy fixated in that really, really oppressive sign of Capricorn. So it's a fallen moon in the 4th house of family. Does not bode well for family dynamics. But it is really funny to me personally, because we've got this ascendant in Libra and this Neptune in Libra, and this Neptune in Libra is making an exact square to the 29-degree moon in Capricorn. So there's this, you got this slippery Libra nature, like you're just too nice. You're just too nice, my dear. And that niceness is really what saved you from being oppressed by this Capricorn full moon in the house of family. Like they tried to keep you down, and you just weren't about it. You just were not about it at all. There's always going to be financial support when it comes to friendships. This North Node in the second house of finance, something that you're supposed to master this time around, being connected to Mars and Venus and Leo up in the 11th house of friendships. Whenever I see Mars and Leo together, in this case in your chart, there is an exact conjunction at 13 degrees of Leo between Mars and Venus. The idea of working with gender issues in the community, I think that's something that you would be very, very excellent at, because we've got both the feminine sign and the masculine sign conjoined in the 11th house of friendships, social groups, tribes. But we also have Uranus and Pluto here, which are two generational planets that you've chosen to put into the 11th house as well, making just this really intense social activism side to you. But I think specifically if you wanted to work around sexuality, gender issues, that would be an excellent move for you to work with. And in fact, you would be quite famous for it if you chose to go through that, with the sun in Cancer ruling all of those 11th house friendship placements. Venus is also ruling the chart too. So like the idea of this Venus and Leo, like, girl, you just love to be in front of a crowd. It's just all about you. I can't, like, unless the eyes are on you. And it's not saying that you're selfish or you're self-centered. You just, girl, you got a lot to say. You got a lot to say, and I'm here for it. I think that you deserve to have a lot to say, because there's this compassionate Cancer sun and this compassionate Mercury in Cancer, but the Mercury in Cancer is opposing, this moon in Capricorn. Like, despite the struggles that were enforced upon you when you were younger, like, you're here to break the mold and to speak out. You're here to shake up the generational divide with these concepts, and to really reframe social integrity. Like, it's such a powerful placement in the chart. I think it's beautiful. Let's see what else. We do have some healing stuff that's pretty interesting. Working in the health and wellness field, working in nursing, working in hospice. Jupiter in Virgo is being ruled by this Mercury in the 10th, but also is ruling the 6th house of work, health, pets, from the 12th of healing. Yeah. I think that's something that will constantly be a part of the journey, is understanding that, there is a remedy for every ill. And it's just, sometimes you got to work for it, and sometimes the best remedy for the ill is love. And that's very much your Mercury and your sun in Cancer coming through. Like, the idea of, if you could just kiss the boo-boo and make it better, like, that summarizes a big chunk of your chart, because nobody was really there to kiss your boo-boos when you needed them. But I think you talking about your healing journey, I think you vocalizing, teaching, that's going to happen later in life, because we've got this Saturn and Sagittarius retrograde in the 3rd. You accessing your voice is going to be a necessary skill, but it will be a very difficult skill to develop. It also wouldn't surprise me if you struggled with speech impediments, or had some sort of learning difficulties like a dyslexia, due to that mutable Sagittarius and that Saturn being retrograde in the 3rd house of communication. But yeah, it's one of those things where, like, just let your heart be your guide, because you've got a super, super big one. And again, a lot of your focus should be in the 11th house of friendships, tribes, social groups, communication to a wider audience, especially revolving around the Mars and Venus issues of gender, sexuality, and incorporating some healing on the side. Excellent. Thank you, my dear. I appreciate you. Yes, thank you for all the messages. I will touch on those when I get done, because we're live right now. I can't pause and answer. I'm also getting emails, as you might have just heard, from people requesting consults. Thank you for supporting the work. Let's talk about Yvonne. Yvonne was born at 7 a.m. in Libsyn. Hi, Yvonne. How you doing, darling? Take a peek at her chart. So we've got Scorpio stellium in the first with Jupiter ascendant, Venus, and the Sun. Venus is retrograde in Scorpio in the sign of its fall retrograde, but it is conjoined the Sun in Cazimi still. Difficult. We've also got Mercury retrograde in Sagittarius in the second, South Node Mars in Sag in the second, ruling the chart. Okay, Yvonne, let's talk about this. I think one of the major lessons that you're here to learn is how to protect your resources. I think that, especially because this moon in Virgo in the 11th is really shining through very strongly, I think that you starting to understand you can't trust everybody. I think having you understand that you need to be picky about who and how and why you choose to socialize with people, what you choose to keep around, especially in the financial world, what you choose to spend your money on. To have this Venus in such a detrimental state in the first house, I think a lot of your journey will be reclaiming your femininity, restoring your goddess nature. Venus doesn't like to be in Scorpio because she's naturally opposing her ruling sign of Taurus. And then also to have Venus retrograde, moving backward in the sky at the time of your birth, very close to your ascendant and in the heart of the sun, you've decided to kind of don the gown of the victim, of somebody who has been traumatized and had the femininity stripped from them, somebody who has had to become fierce, somebody who has had to become somewhat cold because of Scorpio, somebody who has had to understand that, yes, shit happens in life, and it'll happen a lot more frequently if you let it. But a lot of your chart journey, a lot of what you're here to learn is how to not let yourself be taken advantage of, both by yourself and from others. Let me say that again, both by yourself and others, because it's not just about other people. Yeah, a lot of times we are our own worst enemy. And although you don't mean it, yeah, ignorance is not always bliss, especially when it comes to material resources like time and energy and finance. You can't be ignorant of these things, because that's how you get into trouble, and that's how you rely on people you shouldn't. Yeah, especially with this Venus in Scorpio retrograde ruling the 7th house of relationships. I think that there's a massive idea of you having relationships be an echo for you. Yeah. But a lot of times it feels like they're trying to push and pull you and control you on a negative side. But if you recognize that they're actually getting you to try to feel safe, yeah, they're trying to provide for you. They're trying to get you to understand that trust is a big thing. Yeah. And for somebody who came in with this idea of needing to learn how to use power, resources, attention, time, but also the idea of giving your heart to somebody in a very strategic and almost business-oriented way, like, it's a tricky lesson dynamic, because we need to pull you out of all of these Scorpio tendencies to withdraw, to play the victim, to play somebody who has been damaged, because your especially your Virgo moon is stronger than that. And although you might not understand it at first, your Virgo moon really does give you an affinity for managing resources and time wisely. But if you're too much in your head about it, that's when stuff starts to get confusing. It's also okay for you to admit that you don't know. Yeah, this Mercury retrograde is difficult in a chart because Mercury is the planet of the mind. It's the planet of communication. It's how we vocalize. And in your chart specifically, my dear, having this Mercury in retrograde also makes it difficult for you to convey what it is you're feeling on any given moment. And because of that, it's also important to have a partner and surround yourself with friends who are very much able to translate and decode what it is you're thinking and what it is you're feeling, because there are a lot of feelings. Yeah, but sometimes you're not able to vocalize them as accurately as you would like. And we need people who are a little bit more emotionally intuitive, who are able to give you the space that you need in order to vent and to be a little bit more in touch with the feelings that you might not even realize that you have. Yeah. You specifically working in the field of finance, I think that that would be an excellent move because Mars is ruling the 6th house of health, also potentially, or work, health, pets. Also you working in health and pets, but also finance. Any of those things would be an excellent income stream for you because of that counterbalance. Where is Saturn? I think it's going to be interesting halfway through the life as you mature, because then you start to upgrade and start to understand, one, with your first Saturn return, and then Pluto in Leo in the 10th gets activated around 50, and then your second Saturn return around 60. I think you're going to start to realize that you actually have a knack for writing, you have a knack for teaching, you have a knack for speaking, and I think that the written word, the spoken word, is actually going to be very important for your therapeutic process later on in life, as you start to understand all of the stuff that you've had to go through, all of the stuff that you've had to overcome. It's time to share. It's time to write that down. It's time to actually be vocal, to categorize your experiences and make them worthwhile, so that you can start to really open up other people's healing journey through the experiences that you've gone through and the lessons that you've learned, because you've had to learn a lot and you've seen a lot and you've been a part of a lot, and those experiences should definitely not be wasted. But you won't have the words to share those until later in life, when you actually start to mature some of your heavier placements. And you'll actually be very well known for your writing too. It's one of the legacies that you promised yourself you would leave with this Saturn and Pluto and Leo ruling the 3rd house of communication. I think that it's time for you to start vocalizing, sharing, writing down, and publishing some of these ideas and experiences that you've mastered along the way. Awesome. Thank you, Yvonne. I appreciate you. Good morning, everybody jumping on. We've got 2 more charts to go through. Let's keep it rolling. We've got Maricela. Good morning, my dear. Born 6 p.m. in Havana. Another frickin' stellium. Goodness, you guys. Libra stellium up in the 10th. But we've got Saturn ruling the chart via a Capricorn ascendant. Saturn is in Virgo, with Mercury in Virgo, but Mercury is retrograde, and the North Node in the 9th. Okay, so let's talk about 9th house stuff. So 9th house is all about travel, foreigners, higher education, spirituality. Having the Lord of your chart in this house means that you are naturally going to be drawn to these topics. However, having a Mercury retrograde in the 9th does confuse, does mess up, does give a little bit of misdirect in regards to this. So I think one of the things that you're going to need to learn, Maricela, is when you send emails, when you have important meetings, when you get on the phone with somebody, it's going to be very important to script out your conversations. Yes? So having people proofread your emails beforehand, having people look through what you're about to say before you say it, having just people be a sounding board for the ideas in your head before you put them down on paper. It's going to be really important to make sure that that Mercury retrograde doesn't miss stuff or mess stuff up. Having an assistant, especially with a stronger Mercury placement, would be ideal for you, because you have this moon in Libra, which really just makes you want to do the right thing all the time. However, you're not going to be able to do the right thing all the time, or seem like you're doing the right thing all the time, if this Mercury retrograde starts to screw up your communication. I'd really actually like you to be working in the fields of travel, as well as higher education. I think that you'd be very, very good at it, because that Mercury is ruling the 6th house of work. Yeah, I think you'd just be really, really good at it. from a physical standpoint, because we've got so much in Libra and so much in Virgo, we need to respect the idea of absorption issues and filtration issues potentially being in the body. Taking care of the small intestine, going to be very important with that Mercury retrograde in Virgo. Some irritable bowel stuff, not necessarily from a stomach perspective, but or a colon perspective, but from a small intestine perspective, an absorption perspective, as well as kidneys potentially getting involved from a health standpoint. Oh, and Jupiter in Cancer, like that's going to be a bloating situation. So digestive in all ways, shapes, or forms going to be very, very appropriate for you to focus on health-wise in the chart. Let's talk about this Jupiter in Cancer. Jupiter in Cancer in the sign of its exaltation, absolutely fabulous. The spouse that you're going to eventually have in your life or have had in your life is going to be very prosperous, is going to be very giving, very nurturing, all those Cancer qualities, but Jupiter makes things big, makes things regal. This person might actually be physically bigger in stature, kind of like that jolly king or queen archetype, because Jupiter just makes things big, especially with Cancer, the sign of the stomach, having a big stomached spouse. But you love that because you love to see people enjoying life. I think that's one of the big things that you're a fan of. Also, it wouldn't surprise me if this spouse is in the field of writing, teaching, communication, and or health, because there's connections between the 3rd house and the 12th house. 12th house is hidden enemies, jails, hospitals, karmic healing, but also that Jupiter ruling the 3rd house of writing, teaching, communication. Let's look at the stellium in Libra up in the 10th house of success. So we've got Venus here, Mars here, Moon here, Pluto here, MC here, all in the 10th house of success. Children, going to be very successful because Venus in Libra is ruling the 5th house of children. Wouldn't surprise me if there was actually fame in the family as well, because the 4th house is in Aries, being ruled by that Mars in Libra. Although Mars doesn't really like to be in Libra, so there could have been negative fame consequences for the family, like the family specifically like getting published in the newspaper for something that was not ideal. That could potentially be an issue. Moon and Pluto in Libra, I just enjoy the idea of you naturally understanding how to wield power and fame successfully. The Sun in Leo in the 8th, like you know how to be in front of a crowd, you know how to woo, how to turn on your charisma at a moment's notice. But I think again we need to redirect all of that energy into the 9th house of travel, foreigners, higher learning, and spirituality, so that you can activate some of your North Node potential, because that's really where the growth aspect is in your chart, as opposed to other areas which are fun, but they're not necessarily where you're supposed to be growing towards. We're always supposed to be growing towards that North Node. So even though you have a lot of 10th house stuff, even though you have some spouse stuff that's really interesting, we really need to be focused on the 9th house and making that a little bit more of a career for you, so that you can understand some of those resources that you can really strive towards and make your own, with that Sun in Leo being an excellent entrepreneurial energy, as well as Capricorn ruling the chart, also very, very good at building things over time. Thank you, Maricela. I appreciate you donating your chart. And we've got one more chart. We've got about 8 minutes to do it. Let's run through it. So we've got Vanessa. Vanessa, my dear, my darling, born at 6:48 p.m. in Tarpon. Let's take a peek. Oh, Cancer on the ascendant. I love it. Cancer on the ascendant with Moon ruling the chart in Scorpio. That's fun. So we've got this really emotional nature in the chart. Very, very emotional. 2 water signs in one of the major, one being the ascendant, one being the moon. You got 2 out of 3 of the major personality markers in water signs. That's some big water energy. But also, because the moon is ruling your chart and the moon is in the 5th house, we have a very a very key emphasis on the fifth house, which is going to be children, parenting, sexuality, and creativity. Sexuality is also emphasized because Scorpio is a very sexual sign. So we need to make sure that that side of you is embraced and nourished. There is also, because anytime a water sign and the moon are associated with the fifth house, there's big fertility energy. So we need to really be aware of the sexual, the reproductive component of Vanessa being very, very strong. But also very maternal, very protective. Cancer and Scorpio, both very protective of their babies. Yeah. And we've got another stellium to wrap it all up. We've got Pluto in Capricorn, Sun in Capricorn, Mercury Capricorn, Jupiter Capricorn, all in the seventh house of relationships. Which is interesting because of a couple reasons. One, Mercury in Capricorn is in mutual reception to Saturn and Virgo in the third of writing, teaching, communication. So having a spouse who is in the writing, teaching, communication field, very, very big. But also the spouse that you choose going to be very level-headed, potentially associated with academia, somebody who is striving very, very hard to do what it is they feel is correct and right for the world, potentially breaking through a lot of boundaries. You've chosen a spouse that is a mover and a shaker, somebody who's very strong, very powerful, very much a go-getter, very much somebody who also respects time as a factor of growth. But that Mars and Sagittarius in the sixth house, like, you work really, really hard, but potentially will also work with your spouse or significant other too. Yeah, you also have great, great stuff when it comes to making a lasting impact on the world. This Mars and Sagittarius is also ruling the 10th house of success. I really enjoy that placement. I think it's fun. But from a money perspective, like, money doesn't really do it for you. You're not really here to learn about money. Like, you understand wealth, you understand prosperity. It's just not something that kind of wins in your book, but instead we're learning about the 8th house. We're learning about entrepreneurship. We're learning about investment. We're learning about taxes, estates, the higher expression of those financial resources and how we invest in our lives. And I think a lot of what you're going to be investing in is going to be writing, teaching, communication. So using your financial resources, especially financial resources that are connected to all of your spousal activity, to invest in topics like writing, like teaching, like communication, investing in schools, giving back, or being philanthropic with supporting other publishers, potentially starting a publishing company. That would be really fun. Yeah, I just see really good things in the chart. Very interesting dynamics as well. But these interesting dynamics also need to be understood because there are fundamental needs that come first. This ascendant in Cancer, this moon in Scorpio, both talk about very much a sensitive dynamic to the persona. And that sensitivity needs to be respected as you strive for all of these things. Like, you've stacked your chart for so much power and prowess. Yeah. But your own needs need to be met first. Yeah. Your own sensitivity needs to be respected before other people's need to be respected. Like, understand that if you feel out of sync with your life, it's because you're not paying enough attention to yourself. Because a lot of these, I hate to break it to you, but having a lot of watery placements in the chart makes you way too empathic, makes you very, very intuitive, and makes it easy for you to sacrifice your own needs for the needs of others. So as you start to climb the ladder of life and start to be very involved in your success, your spouse's success, and helping other people be successful, remember that your needs are important, your needs are valid, and your needs are more valuable, because if your cup is empty, then you cannot fill the cups of others. Yeah? We need your cup to overfloweth into other people, but that only comes from a radical sense of self-care. If you don't have that radical sense of self-care, then you're not going to be able to nourish the people around you. And that's the hot tea. Okay. Thank you, Vanessa. I appreciate you. Thank you, everybody, for jumping on. We are at an hour. It has been another pleasure. If you would like to be in the queue, just send your birth date, place, and exact birth time to me via private message, and I will add you to the queue. If you are interested in scheduling private consults, just go to ScorpioRisingAstrology.com. Check out my consultation listings, as well as check out the daily posts that I do on Instagram and Facebook. Check out all my TikTok videos, which are super fun and funny, as well as in the stories on Facebook and Instagram. And until next time, may the stars be ever in your favor.